Welcome to Next. I'm your host, Michael Sonnenfeldt, founder of Tiger 21, the premier peer membership organization for extraordinary entrepreneurs, investors, and executives. Today, we're speaking with Joe Neiman, a serial entrepreneur in the automotive technology space and co-founder of ACV Auctions, a digital marketplace that transformed wholesale vehicle auctions and went public in 2021. Joe also founded DealerClub, a venture built on his first-hand dealership experience. Last year, the company was acquired by CarMax, the parent company of Cars.com, for $25 million plus incentives. Joe has built businesses by deeply understanding operator pain points and pioneering the modern digital auction space. His entrepreneurial path began not in technology, but on the ground as a car dealer. At ACV Auctions, Joe helped build a company over several years, navigating the full arc from early formation to public markets. Later, with DealerClub, he experienced a very different trajectory, building and exiting a business at an unusually early stage. Together, these two experiences gave him a rare perspective on timing, momentum, and the different emotional and operational demands required at each phase of company building. Joe, welcome to Next.
Thank you. That's a big introduction to follow.
Tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Where were you raised? How were you raised? And what informed some of your earliest childhood experiences?
Grew up in upstate New York, pretty rural area outside of Albany, New York. Very mixed upbringing. What I mean by that is my parents believed in education, and then I really kind of split these two worlds, or had one foot in one world, one foot in another. And that was, I was friends with the popular kids, the preppy kids, the smart kids in the honors classes, and played soccer and ran track. And then I was also really good friends with the kids who were the woodchucks. They rode four-wheelers and go-karts. And so I think that gave me a pretty diverse upbringing. I knew I would always go to college. It was never a question. But I had friends that were high school dropouts, and I had friends that had landscaping jobs and had no interest in going to college. And I managed being friends and enjoyed being friends with these different groups. What I've always had an understanding of from a young age was real work ethic. My dad was a worker, a bunch of different entrepreneurial ventures. I got a lot of satisfaction from that. Like if I could go out and mow lawns or do snow plowing, it filled me up. So after school, I would go to work. I had a bunch of different jobs that I was doing. Some of them I had no business doing, but we still did them. We would fix cars for people. I was hanging signs for a sign company, driving crane trucks when I was 18 years old.
I had many of those same traits in my own childhood, going across diverse groups of people and lots of different jobs. If there were one thing from your childhood that drove you to be an entrepreneur, do you have a sense of what that might have been?
It was probably watching my father be entrepreneurial, but it's kind of all I ever knew. I never felt like I really worked a job for anyone else, even though I sort of did. I took such a level of ownership over these roles, working for contractors or whatever else it was. I was working for myself.
By the time you're a member of Tiger 21, on average, our members are about 1 in 10,000 by accomplishment, which is simply to say there's something dramatically more than luck, even though luck tends to favor those who are ready and prepared to take the risk. What I'm really wondering, in your case, your father was an entrepreneur and you followed in his footsteps, but in many of our members' childhood, there's something that's making them feel like they really need to succeed. It's not even so much about money. They want to show the world they can make a difference. Sometimes it's childhood diseases. Sometimes parents are alcoholics. In my case, I think my father instilled in me that I could do anything I wanted as long as I earned the money legally, wasn't harming anybody in doing it. But once I earned it, I could do anything I want, and that created a powerful incentive. Do you think it was the pull of entrepreneurship in your father's example, or was there something in your psychology that drove you to achieve the kind of success that you've now had?
There is more to it, I think. I've put some real work into this over the past couple of years to try and go deep and understand a bit more about myself. I think we grew up in a home, and it was not intentional, but that we grew up in a home that had kind of an aura of fear, concern. We did fine, but I think I was always a fearful child. And I know my sister very much so was too. It's interesting how, and this is not a rag on her at all, I don't want it to come across that way, her fears were more front and center and better documented. And mine, I think I just stuffed down and didn't shine any light on. Like breaking out of that or overcoming that was my motivation. So I would do things that, I mean, all this stuff scared me. Buying and selling cars and interacting with customers and driving those crane trucks like I was talking about. Like I was afraid of all of it, but I did it and I craved the thrill and the journey and then overcoming those fears and getting to the other side and, you know, figuring out that I was able to survive it, build on it.
Other than your father, do you remember anyone else growing up who might have been considered a mentor and particularly was able to help you in a way that some might call paying it forward, that them to you, if you will?
A couple of folks. My uncle owned a foreign car repair shop, and I would work there in the summers. He basically told me that I was going to buy my first car, and I think I was 14 at the time, and it was an abandoned Honda Civic that a customer left behind because it simply needed too much work. It wasn't worth investing in. And normally a 14-year-old, you get your license when you're 16, you got no reason to buy a car, but he told me, he's like, you're going to buy it, you know, out of your paycheck and do whatever you want with it. There wasn't a lot of direction, but it was enough that I felt obligated to fix the thing up in my spare time. And that was the first car I sold. And I probably had $200 invested in it, and I sold it for $900. Wow. And that was an eye-opening experience. It's, you know, that's a couple weeks worth of pay. I was probably working for $7 an hour, maybe it was $5.50. That was a moment for sure, because I rolled that into another car and then another car. I remember all these cars, which is kind of ironic and funny. And then there was another guy who was very successful real estate developer that was my father grew up with. And my dad kept in touch with him, and I was able to see through his life, and he showed me a fair amount. I saw his homes, saw his cars, and I wrote some notes down here, but something that I wrote down, I guess two things here is, one is proximity matters. So who do you spend your time with, whether consciously or unconsciously? It frames your mind, and you really are the average of people you spend your time with. And the other thing I wrote down was just dream bigger. It costs you nothing to expand your own mental horizons. And I remember going through all these iterations. It was instilled in me to be grounded in reality and don't think too big. And that's just common. You don't want to get out over your skis. There's a million analogies for this stuff, but it's so damning to take that approach. You'll only achieve what your mind believes you can achieve, because you will sabotage it inevitably.
Today, how old are you, Joe?
39.
So you've had 2 successful exits by 39. By some statistic, there was a drive. It's one thing to want to go into cars because your uncle was in cars or you worked in cars. But for every 1,000 kids that wanted to go into cars, only one of them dreamed as big as you have or accomplished as much as you have. Any sense of what that dreaming was about, that dreaming and scheming and thinking bigger?
You know, probably just pushing, more reasons to push through fear, more reasons to question, why am I having limited beliefs, or what's the genesis of these limited beliefs, and how do I get beyond them? I remember when I was probably 17, I was on Craigslist, probably looking for cars, and I found that somebody was selling a CD, DVD combo set of Tony Robbins for like $40. You know, this is probably something they bought for $1.99, right, on an infomercial. And I met with the guy in a Rite Aid parking lot and bought it. And I mean, I listened to those CDs until they skipped so bad they stopped playing. But it was just expansive. It was just like, oh yeah, it doesn't hurt me to think bigger. Now, it does hurt you in conversations with small-minded people. And so that gets uncomfortable. Your friends, your family, it's like, they don't want you to think that way, or it's threatening or unnerving or whatever it is. So then you have to start evaluating like, well, who am I spending my time with?
It's amazing how many Tiger members are fans of Tony Robbins, not universally, of course. Is there maybe one or two things that when you think about what Tony Robbins represents, and while he's pretty unique, I'm not sure he's the only what I would call motivational speaker that may be diminishing the broader category that he's in. But if he had an impact on you, is there one or two sentences that might capture it?
Like, I'm not a super fan by any means, but I've read the books and they make me feel good when I read the books. What I would say is that he has a really poignant understanding of the human condition and the human psychology. And he's really good at articulating it, and he's extremely charismatic, and that resonates.
You often describe yourself as a car dealer at heart. When did you become a car dealer at heart, and how did it impact your approach to entrepreneurship?
After that first Honda Civic sold and I had $900 in cash that I didn't have previously, I had a friend, still great friends with this guy, and his father was a very part-time car dealer, largely worked out of his garage and had another full-time job. But it gave me visibility into the car auctions, which quite frankly, a bunch of teenagers had no business attending, but these were dealer-only car auctions. We would go, skip school on Thursdays or get picked up right after school because he would go up to the auction and he would buy 4 or 5 Oldsmobile Cutlasses and Dodge Intrepids, and they're just little cheapy price point cars. And so we would go up to the auction, we would drive them back, and then we would do brakes on them or whatever they needed, and then we would help them sell the cars. I think the fascinating thing about the car auctions were, and still are, is that they're kind of like the bleeding edge of capitalism. You'll really see that raw market playing out in real time, and the emotional component of it. I have no interest in going to casinos. I think they're boring. But a car auction, to me, is extremely entertaining. And I know I'm not the only one. I mean, these, a lot of times for at least collector cars, these are televised events. That's where it started for me.
I think people don't quite understand how the car market works. It's clear that you have dealerships, and the dealers buy new cars from the manufacturers. So a Ford dealer buys from Ford Motor Company. But very often when a buyer buys a new car, they trade in another car, which wouldn't necessarily be a Ford. It could be any car, right? The dealer trades in. That's very different than when I'm driving down the street and I see a kind of sketchy place. I guess now there's Carvana and CarMax, but you know, it used to be a fenced-in area with a bunch of cars, low prices on it. But that used car lot is different than what most dealers do with the cars they trade in. So could you try and give a really simple explanation of the car market beyond the dealer, where most of us have bought a new car but really have no idea what happens after that?
The space I play in is purely wholesale. I was a retail car dealer, so I dealt with customers and made a good living selling cars largely on eBay. So I understood online car sales way before Carvana existed, and I was selling 40 or 50 cars a month. But now the big companies that I've created are all in wholesale. So basically what that is there's about 20 million wholesale transactions annually. There's probably 100,000 car dealers in the country. These cars have to trade hands. Ultimately, dealers turn to wholesale and largely auctions as the facilitation marketplace to create close to instant liquidity for an asset that's just not ideal for them. So you mentioned a Ford dealership. If you traded in a Cadillac that had 130,000 miles on it, a Ford dealer might look at that and go, you know, it's a nice car. But either way, it's not something that we're going to retail to another customer. But we have $8,000 invested in that car, real money. That's called an ACV, an actual cash value. And we need to get liquidity on that car so we can book out this total deal of, you know, whatever the other vehicle is that was transacted upon. And so that car has to go somewhere. That Cadillac has to go somewhere. So it goes to an auction. And then it gets sold across an auction block. And it might be one of those chain link fence dealers that buys that car because they understand that car. They understand the customer base that buys that car. And whether they're right or wrong, they think they're the best buyer for it, so they pay more than anyone else.
Is Carvana and CarMax only in new cars or used cars, or where's their place today?
Yeah, largely used, premium, like upmarket, newer used cars. is where CarMax and Carvana play.
What's their genius? What is it that they've done?
I think they're extremely process-driven. That's something that our industry struggles with. There's a lot of folks in a lot of dealerships that have the know better condition, and I definitely have that, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that, and that is to say they think they know better. Whenever you think you know better, it's a blessing and a curse. If I own a used car dealership and I'm going to pay more than anyone else at an auction for a car, I have to convince myself that I know better. I know better than the other 3 people I'm bidding against, that I can find an outcome for that car that's better than they can. I think that Carvana and CarMax have been extremely disciplined. They understand their own data. They've been able to get to a size and scale that gives them real purchasing power, take action when there's trends in the market. And that's just something that the car market outside of those two, and there's some mega groups, there's plenty of mega groups, but they have significant scale. They have significant resources.
And are they buying cars from the dealers or from the auctions?
Both, but they're very active in auctions.
Maybe talk about ACV quickly, maybe give a quick description of what it was. You started it in 2015 and what happened.
ACV was designed in my brain on a yellow pad, basically out of pain and frustration out of going to car auctions. And I loved car auctions, but from a buyer perspective, it was an all-day commitment. I was away from my dealership. So, I did have employees, but generally speaking, especially in a used car dealership, the owner is the key person there. And when they're at auctions 3 days a week, you have less control over what's going on operationally. That was a challenge. And the other part of it was I could only go to one auction in a day. You get accustomed to driving an hour or two to go to these auctions, and you're there for the day and then you're driving back. I wanted to buy cars from everywhere. I didn't want to be limited to the cars that were only, I was in upstate New York, I would go to Connecticut on a Wednesday. But I also could have gone west to Syracuse, kind of equidistant, 2 hours either way. And I had to make a decision to say, I'm probably going to go to Connecticut. I wanted to solve for that. I wanted to find a way to get access to all these cars from everywhere and potentially much further. I knew there's other ways that I bought cars. I didn't just go to auctions. I had relationships with other car dealers, and we would text and we would call each other and say, hey, I just took this on trade. I know you like these. I need a number for it. And so I wanted to try and weave those two experiences together. That was the genesis for ACV, was to increase velocity, increase buying opportunities, and also at the same time, you're increasing liquidity opportunity for the sellers. The bigger the audience they can put a car in front of, and we all know the internet has that scale power behind it. So we created an app. I was a car dealer prior to this. I'm not a tech guy, but I leveraged technology in the sense that I sold cars on eBay, which was progressive back in that time. I had a really good mental picture of what I wanted the user experience to be, and I had total conviction that it would absolutely work. And that goes back to that kind of know better concept of like, I had to have known. If I didn't know and I didn't have that conviction, I never would have bet the farm on starting this business.
So in simple terms, by going digital, you allowed the sellers to have a much bigger reach because they could reach people all over the country or the world for that matter. And as a buyer, you could essentially go to multiple auctions in the same time frame, compare and contrast one car with another.
Yeah.
How unique was that at the time? In other words, were you literally the first person to do this? How do you think about your pioneering the digital car auction? If this is all B2B.
There were some other players at the time. We had some ankle biters that were following us and doing a very similar model to what we did with ACV. I think what we did was we disrupted the model enough because the other online auction platforms were still generally grounded in the confines of the physical auction. Largely, the cars went to the physical auction. It was like a second chance. The car got posted for a few days. Or they had and still have something called simulcast, which is just a streaming video of a live auction and the ability to bid on that. What we did is we really disrupted that whole model because the way these auctions historically would work and still do, the physical auctions, it's once a week. The cars aggregate throughout the week, and then whatever the given day is, that's the day that is deemed auction day. All the dealers converge, and you have 1,000 dealers, and you have 2,000 cars, and maybe it's 500 dealers and 2,000 cars. They battle it out. I just looked at the other way that I bought cars, which I would get text messages at 9 o'clock at night from car dealers that I was friendly with. And I would buy a car over the phone at 9 o'clock at night. It's opportunistic. What we did was a truly spontaneous platform, 20-minute long auctions. So like intentionally rapid fire. You got to act quickly if you want to not miss the opportunity. And that, I think, played well into the psychology of the car dealer.
You know, one of the themes that comes up often at Tiger 21 is how people navigate the challenges and opportunities that come with thinking differently. It's part of what makes so many entrepreneurs successful. That's why this season, as part of our giving moment, we're highlighting understood.org, an organization that provides practical tools for millions of people with learning and thinking differences.
What's so impressive about understood.org is the depth of resources available on their site. Whether you're a parent, an educator, a manager, or someone navigating ADHD or dyslexia yourself, you can explore meaningful topics about the workplace, school, relationships, and daily life. Their guidance helps people understand their strengths and apply them in ways that lead to real success. As part of our philanthropic focus, we're matching donations up to $10,000 total, $100 per gift, to support understood.org and their mission. Learn more at understood.org and visit muse.com/giving. That's MUUS.com/giving, or click the link in the episode notes below to contribute matched by us.
You created a digital platform, an online marketplace. Was one of those attributes that now the car could stay at the selling dealer without having to go to the auction house?
Yes.
And that made the market just more efficient because whoever ultimately bought the car could either pick it up from the dealer or the dealer could ship it directly to the buyer without having to ship it first to the auction house and then to the buyer.
So you speed up the velocity of the transactions and you eliminate costs that are normally associated with the transactions.
You did that for 7 years. You started with nothing. And what had you accomplished, or where were you by year 7?
We went from selling 50 cars in our first month in Buffalo, New York, which is where we launched the company, to eventually selling like north of 50,000 cars a month.
50,000 cars.
Yeah. Yep.
Does that make you the dominant player in the industry?
Amazingly, no. I mean, in our niche of being the online, yes, we probably had sub 10% market share. The physical auctions are really the dominant players, but we put a meaningful dent in it. And, you know, we grew that company. I'm trying to think if there were 1,500 or 2,000 employees. But the way I like to think about that period of my life was I got like several lifetimes of unbelievable experience condensed into 7 years. I mean, we went the whole friends and family round, seed round, A round, B round, you know, through I think a D or an E round, and then going public. And then we went through COVID, which was unbelievable. I guess I'm trying to think. COVID was before we went public, but the rug got completely ripped out from underneath us.
And what was the market cap when you went public?
A little over 5 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must be something to create from scratch, a company that grew to a $5 billion market cap. Talk a little bit about the journey. Were you the CEO the whole time?
No, I was the CEO for probably the first 2 years. Once we started to get sophisticated venture, they really dictated that we needed a sophisticated CEO to run the company. And they were absolutely right. I mean, I was not that guy.
What did you do for the 4 or 5 years when there was a CEO, but you were still the founder? I'm a little like that at Tiger right now. I'm the founder, but no longer the CEO. We've had a CEO there for about 6 years.
Yeah, I probably did a lot of things right and did a lot of things wrong. I spent a lot of time on the road. I have a really deep understanding of what resonates with the dealer and how to sell this product in. So this is not a subscription. This is a use it, believe in it, get results. It's transactional, and then keep using it and try and cultivate raving fans, largely based on things that are really outside of our control. I can't determine what the car sells for.
So were you sort of the chief evangelist for the company?
Yeah.
Even though you were no longer running it? And is there any way you can describe how you felt no longer running it, but you obviously were a shareholder? Your shares must have kept going up. Which did you enjoy, the first 2 years when you were running the company, or the next 5 years when you were doing something else and somebody else was running the company, but you were creating a lot of value?
I think I enjoyed most of it. There were some really painful and challenging times for sure along the way, but I wouldn't say any part was better necessarily than other parts. Like, it was such a grind and such a race the entire time. And I think that's truly what we did the best. We raised a lot of capital. We deployed that capital. We scaled that thing like it was nobody's business. And that's because we had lightning in the bottle. We had proof of concept. We had launched a couple of markets. One market would be like a territory, like a Buffalo or a Syracuse, New York. And we had proof of concept, and the thing was working. And we were compelling with our investment thesis to investors, and they believed in it. They said, yeah, like, go fast, go hard, go take over the country before anybody else tries to do it.
When you sold, I assume you had been diluted down to single digits or something in that range. Talk about that process of having started something, but by the time it's sold, you obviously owned a small portion. It's of a big number, but it's still a very small portion. What was the impact on that?
It's hard watching your control go away and your influence get marginalized, but that is the nature of the beast. While I still had a great outcome, it's why I took a very different approach with the second company, with DealerClub, where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to own the whole thing. I'm sure there are people that would listen to this and go, yeah, that's because Joe is a jerk of a founder and entrepreneur and full of himself and thinks he knows better than everything else. But that is the journey. Like I was starting to say before, you have to believe that you know better. Otherwise, you'd never take the leap. But then there's this arc of getting comfortable, allowing other people to have influence and control. And then you find yourself maybe too far down that curve of going, what the hell happened? I have no influence or control, and I'm at odds with these people. You know, right or wrong, it's not even really about that. I think it's more about, my wealth manager says, roughly right versus precisely wrong.
We want to shift gears here to a new section of the podcast. In a lot of our previous podcasts, some listeners felt there were more questions than answers because we just didn't get into the detail or something just wasn't focused on. So we've gone back and listened to Joe's interview and identified some areas that we know listeners would be interested in expanding on. And this is what Isaac and I were able to do. I now shift role from being the interviewer to interviewee. And Isaac, please, let's go for it.
What were sort of the lessons in terms of, but one of them you've just alluded to, that there's a big difference between creating a lot of value as you're diluted down to single digits and being in control, which you are. But to grow a company, even in the first 2 years that ultimately grows to a couple thousand employees, you had to be pretty great at hiring, creating value, motivating. Is there an aspect of what you did in those first 2 years that you're most proud of?
I think I'm proud of all of it. I think we really built an incredible thing. And we did have, and I don't know what the culture is like there now, but we had an incredible culture at that company at ACV. And I hope it's still tremendous. It deserves to be. They have good leadership there and good people. And it's a lot of the same people that were there when I was there. And what was definitely interesting and I think very noteworthy is we were just selling used cars. We're not curing cancer. We're not doing anything truly remarkable. And yet, people got really excited, really passionate. We really delivered meaningful, quantifiable results to customers. They would get excited, and it just felt good. There were a lot of challenges and a lot of backfires along the way and problems that came up. But keeping people excited, hiring happy people, and keeping people happy, I've just seen it so many times now over the past, really more than a decade, probably 2 decades. There's only so many hours in a day that an employee is going to work. They can either be productive because they're not hamstrung by problems and drama and things that are eating at them, or they're completely overwhelmed by those things and they're having sidebar conversations with their colleagues and they're doing absolutely nothing productive. If anything, it's completely detrimental to the forward progress of the company. As a leader, I think it's imperative that you are hyper sensitive to trying to identify, sometimes it's just a bad player in your organization, but other times there's real problems that need to be addressed. And the longer those go on, it's not just that one problem. It's like the whole ethos that radiates out from that. And then you have a bunch of people that are doing nothing productive and belly aching all day and hating their job and being in front of customers with that energy. And it's very detrimental. So I'm very proud of the culture that we'd created, at least for the time that I was there. And I hope it's still every bit of what it was.
If you were giving advice to somebody who was trying to decide when it's time to give up the reins to a CEO that has skills that the founder doesn't have, is there a single piece of advice comes to mind of when you do it and when you don't?
I think that there is no textbook formula for this stuff. I think you have to trust your intuition, and I think you have to look yourself in the mirror and go, am I the right person to do this? Am I the right person to scale this organization? I mean, one of the first moves that the CEO did was he went and hired an HR leader. And to me, I was kind of baffled by that. We had like 30 people. I don't think we really need HR. But we needed a recruiting engine. We were talking about trying to scale a nationwide company. So like, I didn't even know what I didn't know. And sometimes you have to, I think, step back from being immersed in the company to be able to see the bigger picture. And like,
yeah, I know in the case of Tiger 21, I've only been the CEO for 1.5 year stints of our 27 years. And in the last 7 years, we brought in a new CEO who's been amazing. It's just clear to me he has skills I don't have. I hope he would feel comfortable me saying he wouldn't have started at Tiger 21, but I could never have run. I just don't have those managerial skills. It turns out that this issue of when you grow, are you really improving the company or do you have to compromise quality? What we found is that as you grow, you can improve quality if you have the right management. I'm wondering whether it was simply that you had venture capitalists that forced you out, or in retrospect, did the CEO you brought in bring real skills that you didn't have?
I think it's much more the latter. And I never felt forced out, not by the VCs either. Like, I think they were spot on. Right. They wanted me in the business. They knew that I had industry knowledge and perspective that was pretty unique and hard to replace.
How did you know when it was time to sell?
My opinion, my voice, the issues that I saw in the company that I wanted to address were just not where the leadership of the company wanted to put their attention. I sat on it for as long as I could, and I tried to find ways to impact things positively. It just ran its course, and 7 years and what I would consider several lifetimes of experience condensed into that period. It certainly wasn't easy, but I kind of felt like I got the runaround from some folks there who were above me. The other truthful thing was, at that point in time, I was looking at what my shares were worth, and I had no ability to exercise those shares as an executive in the company in a meaningful way. And this goes back to that roughly right versus precisely wrong. I'm going, I think it's overvalued, quite honestly. From where I sat, what I saw, maybe I was just miserable.
When the stock went public, did it go up or down, or what was its journey while you were there?
Basically only went down with some variations along the way. Yeah, I think it opened, or its peak was $38 right after IPO. And I was very fortunate in that I was able to do a green shoe opportunity, myself and my one co-founder. Goldman was the one that really made out because they guaranteed us $25 and we had to agree to it the day before. And, but I got probably a quarter of my position out day 2 at $25 a share. And that's the first time I ever had any real wealth. And that was significant. I just kind of benchmarked it against that. I think that stock might have went all the way down to $6 at one point and then came back up into like the mid 20s. And that's when I said, I don't know where this thing's going to shake out, but in the mid 20s, I had a lot to unload and there were limitations on how quickly I could unload, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And I think it trades around $8 right now. I feel good about how I got out.
I know you took some time off and then you started DealerClub. Just give a description of what was DealerClub in relationship to ACV. What role did it play and how did that move forward, so to speak?
Truthfully, it's a lot. It's all the concepts that I wanted to deploy over time at ACV and wasn't able to get into production. We couldn't agree on these things. And so they just sat around basically in my brain, but they were largely the solutions to customer pain points. And so I just wanted to improve what was already existing. So I wanted to go and take a run at a fresh platform that could deliver those things. And that really was shenanigans that happen in car auctions. it's hard to pin down who's really to blame. So the simplest way of saying this with what we did with DealerClub was it was really the first reputation-based platform of the buyers and the sellers.
Structurally, is there a way to describe DealerClub as different from ACV? What did it do differently, or was it just the same, better?
The same, but better, I guess you could say. It still looks like a car auction. We improved the technology. We completely rewrote everything and with the lessons learned and started with a fresh slate. The simplest kind of analogy, and as far as where I saw an opportunity, was you were only able to realize a price based on how confident and how secure and comfortable the buyers and the sellers are in a given marketplace. And so if they're fearful for reasons such as they think they get burned a lot in this marketplace, where things show up and they're not as described, they start to hedge their bets. They start to hold back their bids. When they start to hold back their bids, it causes gaps in liquidity. It's not good for the sellers because then they're selling for less than the asset's really worth. So like a brand new 60-inch TV, what's it worth on the shelf at Best Buy? What's it worth off the back of a box truck in an alley? It's the same TV. It transacts at two different price points. Why? Because one has higher risk associated with it. It's still the same asset. So the genesis here was, hey, look, if we can build a platform where people know the seller and they know the history of the seller and they can tell that the seller's a good guy and he describes the car accurately, he's going to be rewarded. He's actually going to be able to purchase cars from other auctions.
It's kind of like when I look on Amazon and the seller is rated, I know it's a number one seller or something. But I think what you're talking about is in your second business, you were more explicitly focused on building trust within the community. You started your next company, and obviously when you started it, you probably early 30s at that point, I guess, or mid 30s?
Mid to late 30s.
And probably thought, well, I did the last gig for 7 years. This is going to go on for longer, but it didn't work out that way. What happened?
I self-funded the thing, put together a great team of folks, and built it over the course of somewhere around 12 to 18 months, which was really a record pace to create what was created. We went out to market with it, made a bunch of noise on all the traditional channels of social media and LinkedIn. And very early on, former CEO of Cars.com and Cars Commerce reached out to me with a LinkedIn message, admiring what you're doing from afar, would love to connect sometimes. So connected with him, and he wanted to learn more and see what we were doing, and was a very fast-paced acquisition that none of us really saw coming. But we were at an inflection point with the company where we were our first couple months. I had a very small sales team. I had 3 guys out there, and we were really just kind of bringing it to market and testing it. But I knew, like, as much as I wanted to self-fund this thing, I know how much capital these require. It was either going to be, we're going to go look at private equity or venture in the next 3 to 6 months and start having some conversations and see who the right partner would be. And Cars.com came along and told me how they have hundreds of salespeople. And obviously I'm familiar with Cars. I was a customer of Cars. They have 20,000 dealers in their ecosystem that are already paying customers. And it just, at that point in time, it made a tremendous amount of sense to be acquired. We structured a deal and we sold the company 3 months after we launched the thing.
You left or continued on?
No, I'm still there today.
Is it a full-time gig or you got a lot of flexibility?
I've got a fair amount of flexibility, but myself and my whole team have transitioned into Cars Commerce.
And how long now are you in this new mode of being part of Cars Commerce?
We have a 4-year earnout. So as far as I consider it, I'm there through that at least, to go build them a really robust and big marketplace.
You've hired a lot of people over the last 2 gigs. Are there any specific ways you think about hiring that have served you well? If I said I'm starting a company, I'm going to be hiring, what are the 2 or 3 things you'd be telling me to make sure I'm looking at?
I can't take credit for this one. This was a guy named John Elm, who was Coca-Cola bottling CEO, who I was fortunate to know before he passed. He told me hire happy people, and that really stuck with me. You want people that just have healthy outlook on life and people that you want to be around, because you spend more time with your business associates than you do your family. And so you pick your spouse, you have the opportunity to pick your business partners as well. And to me, it's not all about the credentials at all. It's really, I want to get to know that person. Is this person going to drive me crazy? Am I going to drive them crazy? Because we've got a lot at stake with what we're trying to do. And especially the way I do business is, for better or worse, it's all extremely high stakes. It's all very fast paced.
If I asked your wife to describe your work week, what's your work week look like?
It's manageable now.
What was it then and what is it now?
I used to leave the house at 4:00 in the morning to catch a flight to somewhere in the country to go meet with an ACV territory manager. And I'd be back, Wednesday or Thursday at 1:00 in the morning and then go into the office for the remaining week. But I got no regrets. My kids I only had my first child at that point in time, and she was real little. And that was the time.
70, 80, 90-hour weeks?
Maybe.
And now?
Pretty balanced. And then it's a lot of phone calls and a lot of Zoom. We're a remote team at this point, is all remote. So there's a fair amount of flexibility, and it works out pretty well. I mean, I also hired people to backfill the majority of what I can do. And that feels really good. And it also just feels responsible and right.
Would you say that there was a period where you were delaying gratification or sacrificing in ways that you noticed your friends were not, ultimately probably paid off in just the story you've been telling? But was that sort of, in hindsight, a part of your experience?
Very much. For as long as I can remember, my entire adult life, even predating probably college, was delaying gratification. And I don't know if it was all right either. There's a lot of stuff that I look back on and I kind of missed out. I kind of missed out on my, you call it innocence, but just being able to play and enjoy life versus always thinking about what's next and what should I be doing with my time and what's a better use of my time. At some point, you just got to say, screw it. I want to live and I want to have some fun. So I've gotten better about that, but I'm probably 20 years behind and trying to make up for some of that. And no real regrets there, but
I don't think you're behind. I think you're actually right on track. If you go to the very, very top investment banks or law firms, typically it's 7 to 15 years before you become partner.
Right.
So you get there in your mid-20s and you don't get to be a partner until late 30s or 40. But once you are a partner, your life changes, or in some firms changes dramatically. But you did have to sacrifice. And many entrepreneurs, the key to their entrepreneur is not just sacrificing time and not seeing family, but really foregoing or delaying gratification so that you can put everything into the business and build it. And the only way you can do that is really successfully is with a spouse. How did your wife feel about all of that? And given now the success that you've created, does it feel like you've been vindicated and she too?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a really unique story. We met when we were 20 in college. Maybe it's not all that unique, but I think what's unique about it is we've been through everything together my entire adult life. And I look back at my teens and stuff. There were some formative years, but I really, kind of playing back into those Tony Robbins CDs, I reinvented myself. There was the way that I was raised, and then there was the shift in how I wanted to, the new lens in which I wanted to see the world. And she met me at the start of that. And so we've created everything together. I thought about this pretty deeply fairly recently in that, and she's a strong-willed woman, and she gives it right back to me like I need it, because not many people do. And so she grounds me, and it's good. I could probably be a danger to my own self had I not had her all these years. But when I think about what I've dragged her through over the years, yes, now we've got to this unbelievable place in life, which is great. We've lived in 8 different homes, 2 different states, but in one state we were 300 miles. So I've dragged her around, if you will, and subjected her to a lot of change.
I'm smiling because we're recording this today on my 49th anniversary.
Congratulations.
I've been lucky enough to have a wife whose father was an entrepreneur, and therefore she understood the journey that I was on. And if you were giving any advice to a young entrepreneur about a spouse or a significant other, what are the 1 or 2 most important things you would share with them to make sure it might be a good fit?
The sooner you can realize what you have there with your spouse, the better. And I didn't always realize it. And I look back and she's been so committed and dedicated to our relationship, even if it didn't always feel like it she always was. The time goes by really quick. We just had our 15-year anniversary. We've been together for 20 years and we've got 2 kids now. And it's just like, this is flying by and it's great. There's such a rush to go and build these businesses. There is real risk of burnout or prioritizing these businesses over things that truthfully are more important, which is your family. And you got to really balance that. I think it's family and health, and it's so easy to justify. I've truthfully gotten myself very, very sick over the years. And when I look back, it's all stress related. Like you can say it's a disease or you could say it's this, it's all stress. And so you really got to be aware of that. And you got to listen to yourself, because there's no point in taking these challenges on and trying to get to the end of the rainbow in the pot of gold if you're going to be sick and miserable and divorced at the end of it.
Tiger 21, once a year, each member gets to do a defense of some sort. It's either a portfolio defense or a life defense or a philanthropy defense. You spend an hour and a half in a setting you couldn't find anywhere else, because everybody around the table are your peers and are there to help you. They're there to serve, not to sell. I'm wondering if anything memorable has come out of any of those experiences for you that stick in your mind.
I would just say at a high level, the feedback that I get during that portfolio defense is so genuine and dialed in that these folks can read me. I've been with Tiger 21 now for 3 years. They know me better than I know myself in a lot of ways, or at least they're not going to believe my BS. That's been very helpful. And especially, they are peers, and I'm truly humbled to consider these folks peers, because I look around that room and go, I don't belong in this room, but I guess I do. But that's a powerful feeling. And to know that these people just want to see me be happy and live the best life possible, because at least our group, we're not all about the money. It really is that holistic picture. So I've just gotten unbelievable feedback from them about where I should be putting my energy and maybe where I shouldn't be putting my energy into.
How many years left on your earnout?
Another 3 years.
Doesn't matter whether I'm asking you to imagine 3 years or 5 years or 10 years from now. You'll stay as long as you like it and it keeps making sense. Say, what do you imagine will come next?
I like challenges and making memories. And I find that when I can kind of put those two things together, that really scratches an itch for me. Started flying airplanes over the past couple of years, which is something I've always wanted to do. Back to when I was a teenager and just had not even the first clue of how I would get into that. And 20 years goes by and it's like, maybe I should start that. Really enjoyed that, and have really enjoyed the process of learning again. And with aviation, like, the consequences are significant. You don't want to be an idiot or end up dead. Like, you take your training seriously. And I was always a good enough student. I wasn't a great student. It's hard for me to sit and study and read. I'm definitely everybody says they have ADD, but probably do. That's been a fun and challenging journey for me. Really just even understanding how I learn. Where I've gotten a lot of success is doing really accelerated ratings and courses. So I got my instrument rating in 2 weeks. I got my commercial rating in a week. I got my multi-engine in a week. It's not to say that I'm smarter or some great pilot. It's really not that at all. I have found that immersive learning is it really works for me.
It's so great. It sounds like you're in a sweet spot of life, 39, 2 exits, wife and kids, leading a great life. I'm just wondering if there's anything you want to add to our tip jar. We do this at the end of every show, and you do it at the end of every meeting. Is there a book or a habit or a recommendation or an app or something that's had a big impact on you? Do you have any 1 or 2 things that is on your mind for a tip jar?
Sure. I use the Waking Up app, which is just a meditation app. I always feel better when I spend 10 minutes sitting on the couch and just quieting my mind. That's an easy one.
What most commonly happens when you're meditating? In other words, people say, why do you meditate? Is there something that stands out about the power of that experience?
I think you've got to rest your brain in order for it to think clearly. Culturally, and especially in the rat race that I tend to run in with trying to grow these businesses as quickly as we do, we burn that resource up. And that's a real risk, because if we can't think clearly, It doesn't matter how many cycles we put on that brain. If it's not working optimally, you can garbage in, garbage out. And so take care of your brain, rest your brain. And I find 10 minutes of meditation for me, and I'm not some great meditator. I need an app and I need a guided meditation to get any semblance of quiet in my brain. I can be in bed and try and sleep for 8 hours, but my brain is spinning. My brain I wake up the next day and I'm probably more tired than I went to bed. I think a lot of us entrepreneurial type folks got to the point where we're at because we're always on, but it's kind of a path to a burnout, and you got to be really careful with that.
I'm a daily meditator as well. It's amazing how many Tiger members are meditators. I think one of our groups actually begins every meeting with a meditation, which was a shock to me.
That's really great.
Joe, it's been so great listening and learning from you today. How can listeners follow your work? Do you have any kind of public-facing media or blog at all? Or
I'm partially embarrassed, but partially proud to say, like, my social media presence has gone down to almost zero, and I'm pretty okay with that.
Do you ever get calls from somebody asking advice?
Yeah.
Would you take a call from somebody just seeking
all
advice?
The time.
How do they reach you?
Yeah, jsneiman@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Listen, it's been so great. I want to come back in 10 years and see what's really next for you. You're on such an amazing trajectory. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.